Thank you all for choosing to watch this presentation. I'm here now with Stephanie Wheeler, who's been doing the independent cultural review of Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm really excited to talk to you now for a few moments about what we found through the cultural review and also the actions and steps we're going to take moving forward. Many of you will have met Stephanie, but I'll hand over to her now to introduce herself and talk about what she found through the independent cultural review.
Thanks, Ben. So hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Wheeler. I'm an independent consultant with an organisational change and culture background, and I was asked by Warwickshire Fire and Rescue to carry out the culture review. I'm going to start today by just skipping through what we'll cover in this presentation. So I'll go back to Ben in a moment to talk about why Warwickshire initiated the culture review, and then talk to you a little bit about what we mean by culture. I'll then dip into what we did and who we heard from, and then share some examples of your current culture in terms of good practice and the current employee experience. We'll then move on to your ideas, and some of those ideas are moving straight into action, and then talk in more detail about some other actions and then suggested next steps. And finally, we'll come back to you for any feedback or questions. Okay, over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yes, I want to talk a little bit about the background and why we did commission an independent cultural review of Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. In the press and the national news over the last 6 to 12 months, there's been a number of reports about the culture within the Fire and Rescue Service. Some of those reports were worrying, they were concerning, and they were upsetting too, in parts. So we wanted to commission a culture review of Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service because we want to understand the environment in which we all work, because I am committed to ensuring that everyone feels included, welcomed, and that they can be themselves and their best whilst at work. So it's really important part of what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward and translate this into action, because I want Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service to be a brilliant place to work. I'll hand back now to Stephanie.
Thanks, Ben. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we mean by culture. So culture at its most simplest is how we do things around here. It's literally the way things get done in organisations. And that's made up of the actions, what you actually do. That's not the theory. It's not what's written in handbooks or manuals. It's the actions that you actually undertake day to day, and the behaviour, the way you actually do them. Again, hopefully that's in line with your values and ethics, but it's the actual behaviour that people see and experience day to day. It's also about how you feel when you come into work, how you feel whilst you're at work, and how you feel when you leave. Do you feel that you've achieved something? Do you feel that you're proud of where you work? And around all of that is your personal mindset. So your personal beliefs that shape how you see the world, because they will contribute to the way you contribute to the culture of the organisation. What we know is a positive culture depends on a number of factors. I'm not going to go through every one of these because you can see them on the screen, but I'm just going to pull out that a clear purpose, so knowing why your organisation exists and what its purpose is really important to enabling a positive culture. Other things that we know are really important are transparent decision making. People need to understand why decisions are being taken, what's behind them. And another really important factor is feeling empowered and trusted to do the job that you're paid to do. So those are just some examples of what we mean by culture. I'm now going to move on to just talk a little bit about what we did and who we heard from. So many of you will be familiar with what we did because over 300 of you took part in the culture review. And that's a personal thanks from me to the high engagement that I experienced and participation, which obviously led to some very consistent themes and positive elements of your culture. Also, some very consistent ideas for change. So group discussions, we held 37 of those with 244 people. These focused on things such as why people joined Warwickshire Fire and Rescue and what reinforces or challenges that. We also explored areas such as communication, team working, behaviour, and looked at what motivates people and what demotivates them in the work that they do. And a lot of you talked about whether you would recommend Warwickshire as a place to work. We had 61 one-to-one conversations and also a number of written submissions. So one-to-ones were often driven by someone wanting to share a more personal experience, but then we moved on to talking more broadly about the culture, what works well and what could be even better, but also looking at people's appetite for change and for being involved in what comes out of the culture review. So all in all, we heard from a lot of you, the engagement rate is 67%, so 305 out of 457 employees in lots of different locations and across all of your core functions and roles. And staff tenure ranged from people who'd been with you for less than 12 months to 40 years. So, okay, we come on to what your organisational culture looks like at the moment at its best. So at its best, I heard huge amounts about people's pride in working for Warwickshire. So proud to wear the badge, proud to work for Warwickshire Fire and Rescue, proud to come into work, to do meaningful work that was varied and fast-paced and purposeful. Lots of people really enjoy the job they do and really feel positive about coming into work, and described very supportive colleagues and a nurturing environment where they were supported in their growth or development, but also supported through sometimes difficult or tricky times. And that was related repeatedly through this process. Some people talked about having regular check-ins with their managers. These were quite informal. How are you doing? How's that project going? Or how's your development going towards those exams or particular training areas? So just quite informal, regular checking in, seeing how people are doing. And related to this was quite a lot around personal development and training being supported, and some good career conversations. Many people described that they had always been treated with respect, that they had never felt that anyone had addressed them in a disrespectful way, and that they felt valued in the role that they did and valued in the organisation, and that their pride in working for Warwickshire was really related to that making a difference to our community, being recognised for being a valuable part of the communities that you serve. Lots of practical can-do positive attitude in terms of how can we do this, how can we fix this, how can we address that challenge or reach those people in terms of maybe safe and wells or getting to different communities that may be more tricky to reach or liaise with. And many of you talked about the fact you would recommend Warwickshire as a place to work. Positive feedback on the leadership team, the current leadership team, which is obviously quite new in post as a collective, and people describe this as being the best leadership team you've ever had and being really approachable. People also described feeling listened to by their leaders, managers and peers, and feeling their ideas were heard and sometimes actioned, which sort of quite nicely leads us into where you're not at your best, or we describe you being in shadow if we were relating it to the T2 training that many of you will be familiar with. So what I heard here, which was consistent across a number of themes, was a feeling of lack of accountability, trust and transparency. And these three words were mentioned a lot and fed into an inconsistency around processes and policies and some ways of working. A specific example was a lack of confidence and trust in the promotions process. So people didn't have trust and belief in this process, and therefore some people have decided to opt out of applying for promotion, or they just didn't have a good experience. And that wasn't just related to being successful, it was also related to not having feedback about where they needed to develop or change to do better in the future. I heard about a small number of examples of unacceptable behaviour, and this was absolutely a small number, and it related to some blurring of boundaries. Obviously, I can't go into any specifics because I want to protect the confidentiality and anonymity of the conversations that I had, but I think there would be a few more examples if there wasn't the fear of reprisal and damage to career if you raise an issue. So there's something connected there around that need to make sure that people feel safe to report issues. Heard about siloed working. So this could be siloed working within teams or across locations. So opportunities definitely to address that. And we also heard about some equipment is not fit for purpose. So this would range from appliances to very specific equipment that was maybe used in an office, like a camera or a microphone, but also not having enough of the right equipment in particular training scenarios. So quite a few different examples there. People alluded to standards are dropping in a couple of different ways, specifically around recruitment, where you have changed one of your standards around recruitment to align with a national standard, and there was a feeling that that was a reduction in standards. There was also some feedback around people were coming out of training scenarios maybe not as well equipped as they would have been in the past. So the standards of what we are accepting felt slightly lower than in the past. I heard quite a lot about the layer of clay or concrete. This is something that's described as stopping information feeding upwards in the organisation and also stopping information coming down. Not a really consistent view of exactly where it sits, but it's in that middle to upper management layer that people reflected it most. So micromanagement was referred to in terms of people not feeling trusted or empowered to do their role. And also people talked about not feeling listened to. So if they had ideas, they would then not see any ideas being actioned or no follow-up or feedback about why that idea hadn't been actioned. And finally, there was a number of people who didn't feel they knew who to go to have a good career conversation. And that might be about career of staying in role, but just building on your skills or looking to develop into a new role. So that's a summary of At Your Best and in Shadow. I'm now going to move on to talk about some examples of good practice. I heard a lot of examples of good practice. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'm just going to pick a few out, but all of the information that I'm sharing with you today is based on conversations with you as individuals. So it's nothing that I have decided that would be good to reflect here. It's what you've told me you're proud of or what you've told me is working well. So, for example, I heard a lot about the EDI conversations and the training that's been going on in the past few months and people feeling that was a really significant step forward to having open and honest conversations. I heard a lot about the value of critical incident debriefs and how much teams really appreciated that happening and that it created a space where they could learn from what had happened, but also support each other where, you know, people were maybe vulnerable or hadn't experienced critical incidents much in the past, so hadn't got that experience. Heard a lot of positives around the warm hubs and how different sites were doing different things around these, and the value of informal check-ins and one-to-one conversations, again, really positively contributing to people feeling that this is a nice place to work, you feel supported, you feel safe. So lots and lots of positive examples there. Now I'm going to take you on to what is quite a busy slide, and it has quite a lot of information. So I'm just going to explain it a little first. So this slide represents your current employee experience, and you'll see that all of the statements here, whether they're red, yellow, or green, are positive statements. And every organisation that I've worked with would have a number of yellow statements, would have some green statements, and would normally have some red statements. So no organisation would have all green. That just isn't realistic or feasible because always something is changing or evolving in an organisation. But what we're going to talk through today is some of these statements, and the idea over time is that the actions that come out of the culture review, you'd be looking to change some of your reds to yellow and some of your yellows to green. So the reds are the aspects of your current culture where we heard most negative comments or evidence. The yellows are where I heard a real mix, so different perspectives. Some people's experience was very positive, so it would be green. Other people's was more negative, so that's why they're yellow. And the greens are where we heard most of the really positive comments. So again, I'm not going to go through every one, but I'm going to illustrate a few, and then when Ben comes on to talk about the actions that are coming out of the culture review, you'll hopefully see how they relate to the significant issues that you raised. So if we look at the couple of the red statements under positive environment, which we know is one of those critical things that contributes to a positive culture, you'll see at the moment corporate and fire policies and processes and technology strategies are aligned is in red, because that isn't people's experience. It feels like it's not always clear which policy or strategy you're aligning with. Is it the council strategy or is it the national fire policy or process? So that needs clarity for people. You'll also see fit for purpose equipment is again in red, because we heard quite a lot about equipment that needs updating or replacing or has faults, or there isn't enough of it. So that again would be looking to review and take steps to address that. I think you'll see a number of the actions that are in red and yellow relate to communication and engagement. So I'm going to pull out a few. So I see action as a result of being asked for my opinion and ideas. If you look under meaningful work, we can see we are transparent and have an ongoing feedback loop to share and track progress. So these are both issues that could be addressed by putting a system in place where you have follow-up to ideas and actions, but also you're transparent about showing what's taking place. At the moment, good things are happening, but not everybody knows about them. Or sometimes progress isn't happening, but people don't know that there's a reason why that progress isn't happening, like something that's beyond the fire service's control. So there you can see there's certain steps that could be taken to move those forward. I'm going to move on to a couple of others. I'm clear what leaders and managers are accountable for. If we look under trusted leaders and managers, this is where there's a real opportunity to share what each leader is accountable for, what they're on the hook for, what you can expect from them and what they can expect from you. So if we jump down into a couple of the yellows, I feel valued by leaders and managers. Some people really do feel valued. They have those good conversations, they feel appreciated and recognized. Others aren't having that feeling. So we need that consistency about how leaders work with their teams. Another one that's in yellow is I have trust and confidence in how decisions are made. So some people have real clarity about how decisions are made within their teams or their functions or their roles, but others don't understand why something suddenly appears on their desk as this is now happening, and they haven't been involved or included in understanding how that's come to be. So back to consistency. If we look at support to grow and develop, you'll see when starting a new role is in yellow, I feel set up for success and equipped to deliver. So again, some people start a new role, really clear what's expected of them. They've got the tools and equipment to do that role and they feel set up for success. And maybe they've also got a mentor who's helping them get up to speed on new or different elements of that role. Other people feel that they're going into a new role on a Monday and they have nothing any more or any different to what they had on a Friday, but suddenly they're leading a team, suddenly they're responsible for budgets, procurement, and they haven't got the training or support to do that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the themes here and the actions that are required to help them move from either red to yellow or yellow to green. I'm just going to touch on a couple of the greens before I hand over to Ben. So a couple of really key ones here are we have a strong sense of shared purpose and identity. That's a really powerful, positive element of your culture, that you all know why you're here. You all know the purpose and identity of Warwickshire Fire and Rescue. So it's are really powerful to build on and to move forward. And a lot of people know exactly what's expected of them in their role. They were crystal clear on what their role was here for and what they need to do to be successful in that role. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Ben now to take you into what happens next.
Thank you ever so much, Stephanie. So hopefully you have seen that we have listened through Stephanie's work and through the independent cultural review. But the important point, as you've raised with us, is that we do need to translate this now into meaningful activity and action to make the changes from the ambers here or the yellows into the greens and so on. We really do want to act on this now and make Warwickshire an absolutely fantastic place to work and make the improvements that we need. Now, it's right to say, though, that we can only do that together. So the FAR leadership team are absolutely committed now to taking action. You'll see in a few moments in the action plan that we are taking ownership at a strategic level for every single action here. But we also need you to support us, to work with us, because we can only make these changes and improvements together. So I'm going to talk for a few moments now around the actions that we're going to take. And we've taken two approaches to this. So you'll see on the first couple of slides, there are actions we're going to take immediately. We're going to translate them straight into action. There are then a couple of slides where we're going to talk about actions we're going to take, which might take a little bit longer, need a little bit more work, but we're still as committed to those as well. So I'm sorry this is a little bit small on the screen, but hopefully this gives you an idea of the overarching ideas and areas that we're going to put straight into action and who the FAR leadership team sponsor is for each of those. So I'm not going to talk about them in great detail. I'm going to talk about the high level actions we're going to take. So having listened to you, what we are going to do is we're going to hot desk to support getting to know you and collaboration. So we're going to spend more time in each of the team locations, understanding and talking to you. We're going to ensure that we continue to listen around ways of working and an improvement hub to make sure ideas for improvement are truly listened to, and we will communicate back when we can, or if there are reasons why we can't implement improvement that you are suggesting. We're going to provide clarity and purpose around the role map, and specifically the Watch Manager role map, Watch Manager 11, which is around disciplines, because we are not seeking to create discipline activity where it's not required. And we want to provide clarity about what someone needs to do in order to achieve that part of their role map. We are going to look at a specialist expertise tracker to aid succession planning and support development aspirations. So we're going to try and match existing experts with those with aspirations in those areas to make sure we've got a succession plan around some of the more specialist roles and specialist expertise within our organisation. We are going to look at the employee assistance programme and make people more aware of what's available around that, understanding what's on offer, but we're also going through a review of the employee assistance programme as well to make sure it is really fit for purpose into the future. And then finally, on this particular slide, action number 7 there, we're going to share the on-call 22-point improvement plan around that. So we've been looking at the on-call model, and we are looking to see how we can try and improve the model to make it sustainable into the future. So we're going to share and communicate that 22-point improvement plan. On this next slide, these are still straight into action elements. So we are going to confirm what the transfer process is about and how it works, and able to see where they fit into this, so they understand how that transfer process works. We're going to establish a feedback loop. We understand we need to keep listening. Cultural review is fantastic, and it's shown us that we really need to listen to understand your points of view, and we want to establish a longer term feedback loop so that everyone can raise questions, ideas, and we are very transparent in the actions we're taking into the future. We're going to ensure that everyone is invited to team visits It specifically says station visits there because we've had feedback around making sure that the admin teams are able to attend station visits, but I'd widen that to team visits. We're going to make sure that no one is left out of any of our team visits where we communicate key messages across the service, and we also listen to what you want to talk to us about. We're going to look at updating People Finder to make sure people can find different people in the organisation. There's clarity around that and give people an understanding of how they can also update their own records in that space. We're going to work with neighbouring fire and rescue service around information around cross-border hydrants. Now, clearly we rely on other fire and rescue services to provide us that information, but we've had clear feedback that's something we need to do, and we'll certainly do everything we can proactively to get that information. And then finally, into the straight into action part, we've had some feedback around at what point should an incident commander at different levels, whether it be station manager, group manager, area manager, or principal officer, should take over at an incident. So we are going to review that policy and make it much clearer about when an officer should take charge at an incident, linked to the Health and Safety at Work Act, and we're going to communicate that across the service. So again, this is really, really small on the screen here, so I apologise about that, but hopefully you can see the left-hand column there with areas of action. And these are the actions that will absolutely happen in the short to medium term, but will require potentially a little bit more planning, working with partners across the county council to achieve some of these areas. So we've had clear feedback around the physical work environment. We want to make sure that everyone has fit for purpose equipment to do their role. So we're going to look at that from a digital all the way through to the equipment across all of our teams to make sure that we do what we can in that space to improve our physical work environment. One of the loudest messages coming through this cultural review has been the promotion processes. So we know we need to rebuild trust and confidence in our promotion processes. So we need to look at how we can bring a level of independence, independent verification to that process, so we can start to rebuild trust in our promotion processes. And we're already taking some action in that space to understand how we can do this. We are also going to look at behaviour and provide a confidential way in which people can raise concerns around behaviour in the organisation. We're going to explore a confidential independent reporting line and see if we can develop something in that space. We're going to keep building on our EDI activity. We feel that that has improved. Hopefully everyone feels like they're included, that they belong in our organisation, but we need to continue that conversation in the way that our brilliant people have been doing up until this point. And we need to make sure that we've got a clear understanding around how meetings are managed to make sure they're inclusive, that we have an understanding of behaviours and how people can constructively challenge in all environments. The fourth area where we're going to take action is around communication and engagement. We want to create communication and an engagement strategy that meets all of our needs so that everyone feels like that they are getting their voice heard. There's two-way dialogue, and that there's an accountability around the feedback loop, that those who are accountable do feedback around the areas that they have been told, and there is a strong employee voice. We want to try and make sure that we have some upskilling around comms and engagement across the organisation, potentially a training package around the ability to provide team briefings, team engagement sessions, and engage in two-way dialogue. And we want to create a sounding board of employees' voices representing each function to ensure that everyone has a safe way of asking questions and raising concerns. Next, then, number 5, performance management is an action here. We want to look at performance management and how we develop conversations to find a consistent approach to performance management, to appraisals, to providing feedback, so that the appraisal process isn't a tick box exercise, but is meaningful and means something for you and is a conversation that you value. We want to include regular check-ins, opportunities for feedback. We want to recognise high performance and enable people to really grow and develop in their roles. And we also want to ensure that we effectively manage poor performance. Finally, then, on this slide, number 6 there, leadership and management. We want to continue to develop and support people in their role as a leader and their role as a line manager. So we're going to develop the competency to lead and manage work, and create some additional leadership and management modules to help people to be effective in their leadership and management roles. And we also want to provide some clarity about what's expected from leaders and what leaders can expect from Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. We're also looking to introduce 360-degree feedback process for all leaders across the service. So the final slide here around the actions is that we are going to look at the council and fire service alignment of equipment, policy and processes. We want to look at how the NFCC guidance compared with Warwickshire County Council, compared with Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service policies, procedures and guidance, to remove any duplication, to remove any inefficiencies in that and bring it all together so that we have an appropriate and clearly understood set of policies and processes. We want to bring a level of independence into some of those reviews of policy as well, and we are looking at some independence around discipline and grievance to make sure we get that right as well. Number 8 here is we want to make sure that everyone, whatever role you're in this in our service, feels like they have career development support. We want to empower you to drive your own career, and we want you to be brilliant, be excellent at what you do. We want to be clear around career pathways through the organisation and clarity about the role of the firefighter and opportunities potentially to specialise and to upskill in your current role, if that's what your aspirations are. We also want to make sure that we are mentoring people throughout the service. In relation to health and wellbeing, we want to, and we are, reviewing the effectiveness of our current support mechanisms through the Employee Assistance Programme, making sure we review that and understand that that the provision we have is fit for purpose and appropriate, and all of our people know how to access it appropriately. We're also looking at the wellbeing ambassadors and potentially mental health first aiders to expand and look at that provision, recognising other things we need to look at as well around neurodiversity, in increasing awareness and understanding of that. We are going to have a workforce strategy, and we're going to share that workforce strategy so people are clear around what our approach is to workforce and succession planning, especially in relation to specialist roles, to make sure we have got a succession plan around that. Finally, then, on this slide, we want to make sure that training is appropriate, that we identify current skill sets by role, what's needed in relation to training in each role, and identify any gaps and how we can identify areas for development in that linked to our workforce strategy and planning for the future. We'll look at the potential to increase BA instructors and how we can do that, and we will carry out a service-wide training needs analysis to make sure that we understand what training is required for all of our people across the whole of our organisation, from whatever team you sit in. I'm specifically, though, mentioned due to the feedback around on-call firefighters as well. So the final slide around the summary of actions then is around induction. We're going to make sure that we have got a proper induction programme for new joiners. There is a set of modules that sit with the County Council, but we need to make sure that we have some role-specific elements for fire, and that will be linked to competence to lead and competence to manage as well. We want to review our recruitment processes, the length of them, especially in relation to on-call, and develop relationships with a wide-ranging parts of our community, including sports groups and associations, to try and make sure that we are attracting the best people to Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. And then finally, we want to set expectations. We want to make sure that everyone is clear on the organisational structure, that they understand their role, their accountabilities and their responsibilities, and clear definition within team plans of the role and purpose of each team, so that we have those really clear expectations around what everyone is here to deliver. So I'll hand back now to Stephanie to talk about the cultural review next steps.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, everybody. So in terms of immediate next steps, so this recording is being shared on the 3rd of July, so it gives everyone access to the same information. The plan then is to follow up with monthly culture updates and questions and answers to any frequently asked questions. So that's putting in place that feedback loop. The monthly culture update can take place in many different forms via things like Fire Matters, Chat with the Chief, via team meetings and briefings. So that will be worked on, and a little bit of test and explore with what works best for you as individuals. You'll also hear from different members of the Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service who talk to you about how you work together to implement some of those straight to action ideas. And there will be a number of working sessions. This is something that obviously will need to align with other activity that's already happening, other work streams and other elements of your strategy. So there'll be working sessions sort of over 2 or 3 months where you look at how you implement the actions that Ben went through earlier. And you'll see that there are potential drop downs with specific workstream titles for any new ones that need to be created. So that's just a sort of first high level view of what happens next. But the main commitment there is that monthly update to really demonstrate what's happening when and sharing progress. Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I just want to bring our presentation to a conclusion then by saying a few thank yous, really. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for taking part and being so open, honest, and sharing your views with Stephanie for the cultural review. We really value your view, your point of view, your feelings, and for sharing them so openly. So thank you to the large number of you that have been involved in this. I'd like to thank Stephanie for all of her work delivering this independent cultural review for us, helping us to truly hear and understand our organisation. And we are absolutely committed now to together improving and making Warwickshire an absolutely fantastic place to work here in Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. So thank you all for listening. Should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact. You can get in contact through my email address or through Sharon Kite. Please do raise any questions or concerns or anything you want to raise with us, and you can also discuss it with your line manager. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you.